Are leaders going to make mistakes? Yes. What might be some of the mistakes they might make? Once or twice. I know you don't want to tell on your leader right now, right? Well, sometimes we have a tendency to say, well, who's responsible, right? So if we say who instead of what in the process, allowed this to happen, or what can we do about the process? So sometimes leaders, flub up. They're going to try, and they might make a mistake here and there, as we do as problem solvers. And so again, like we said, it's a journey. We're all on this journey together. So what I'm going to share is a framework to think about when you are a leader, and you also want to really think about this as you're participating in culture and cultural transformation too, not just as a leader. But this is based on what we call the Shingo model. There's really 4 elements of creating and transforming culture. And this is based on, like I said, the Shingo model. There's 4 components of it. There's maintaining a focus on customers, the people that use the processes, right? So we've all been there when people make changes to the process that benefit just their department, right? But it doesn't necessarily benefit the student or the customer of the process. So how do we maintain a customer focus? So there's that piece we're going to talk about. We talk about enterprise alignment. So why are we doing process improvement? Why are we doing Lean Six Sigma? As a leader, what should I be telling my reports? What am I promoting? Now, this is the big mistake I see for enterprise alignment is people don't say anything. They just go launch right into, okay, here's Lean Six Sigma, and here's what it is, and here's, we're going to do these projects. And so if you don't tell them the why behind it, what happens? What happens when they don't know why we're doing this? What do you guys think? You don't get buy-in. They might push back. They might get scared, right? They might think, does Lean stand for less employees are needed, right? No, that's not what it's about. We're not trying to get rid of people. And I've seen many organizations that the employees are afraid because they've never been told that's not what it's about. It's not about getting rid of people. It's getting rid of the wasteful steps every one of us has to do that doesn't add value. It's not about getting rid of Holly. It's about getting rid of those steps that don't add value that Holly hates anyway. Right? So those are the things that we really want to talk about. So enterprise alignment is important. Continuous improvement, which is training. And then the last one, this is the foundation of the whole house, a really key component. What are we doing as leaders to enable a culture of process improvement? So I'm going to briefly talk about those 4 pieces in just a minute. I'm going to give you some questions to think about because, again, this is a very broad overarching, these components or floors is what people call them. You all want to think about these every year at least. What are we doing around customer focused results? And maybe you are kicking butt this year, but guess what? You're on a journey and you're going to get better next year as well. So that's why we keep it broad. This is not super tactical because strategically, we want you to think strategically about being a leader first. And the tactical pieces are going to change a lot. So each of these has a key principle that matter. Customers matter. We align. We're all aligned on what this journey is for and why we're doing it. We can always do better is that mindset. And finally, leading with humility and respect for every individual. So they always say, and it's very true, is how do we make sure that people feel respected, their ideas, their thoughts, their abilities, and what's interesting about a lean culture and Lean Six Sigma is it's a healthy culture. People feel good. They're engaged. I really like the employee engagement. Is it the 3 E's or 3 P's? I forgot. But I wrote it down. I was like, oh, that's good. And she has measures for employee engagement and showing, how do we know? How do we measure engagement? Are we doing these things? Those are really important in terms of leaders. So these are the key principles that we talk about for each of these to promote a lean culture. As a leader, what are you doing in each of these areas? So again, we talk about customers, identifying the customer, and the challenge we run into is when we have meetings, who's the customer advocate, right? Usually the customer isn't there. We're making changes, and if we don't have that voice of customer, whoever the user is of that process, we may forget about their voice. We may do something that is going to affect them in a bad way or a negative way. So there's lots of different voices pulling at the process, right? There's the voice of the business, the voice of the department, the voice of the stakeholder. How many of you know two departments that hate each other? Right? They can't stand each other, but they're delivering, they're supposed to be working together to deliver something to a customer, and they don't get along, right? That's painful. They may not talk so much, right? Or they might be like, well, my department's going to do this, and that's not your department. So there's a lot of fighting in there, and guess what? Customers can feel it. What might happen to the process as a result of this VOD, right? They might not have a very efficient process. So how do you bring people together, departments together? If there's a customer voice and customer metrics, and we both agree that those are important metrics, you can bring alignment there with them. So really focusing on customers of that process, whoever that customer is, can be really important. So that's something that you want to think about. And here's some questions. I don't expect you to know all the answers to these today, but these are things that we do to help organizations get more focus on customers. So who are our customers? Surprisingly, sometimes people don't know. Sometimes they're so separated from who the user is of this process that they're not sure. Or they have so many processes, they don't know who the customer is. So for example, I work in government, I help government a lot, and I work with wastewater treatment, right? In a nutshell, they make stuff disappear. That's pretty much, I'll just say, that's the only thing I'll say about that. They make stuff disappear, you flush the toilet and it's gone. Okay, so who's the customer? Well, the flusher, yes. But they also have cities. They have to connect to cities, the pipes, and there's different jurisdictions. So is the city the partner, the customer, the stakeholder? There's a lot of confusion, right? And so, but it's really important to think about, well, you know, who is the customer? Because we want to make sure that we don't affect them negatively. So that's a really important thing to think about. Who are our customers? And in education, just like government, sometimes we have a lot of stakeholders, right? Stakeholders, they have a vested interest in how the process performs, but they're not the customer, right? So sometimes stakeholders kind of tweak the process and it doesn't work for the customer, right? It maybe adds a couple of steps that the customer doesn't care about. So these are just some questions to think about. You can have a copy of these slides if you want to. But these are all things to think about when you're thinking about customer focus. This can help you to move further in the journey by answering them. Okay, so then enterprise alignment. So enterprise alignment. So if you are driving down the street and you see a picture, you see suddenly you turn the corner and it's all fog. What do you do? What do you typically do when that happens? Slow down. What else? Turn down, put on the lights. What else? What? Low beam headlights. Low beam headlights, right? Why? Why do you do that? Right, because you can't really see what's ahead. You're a little unsure. Actually, I did this presentation in Washington, and they're like, yeah, that's every day. That hasn't... Nothing. We don't do anything. I'm like, okay, never mind. But yes, you slow down. You're unsure. You're uncertain, and often it's because you can't see what's happening. And often that's how people feel. Employees feel. They don't know what's ahead. They don't know the strategic plan. They don't know how it applies to them, and so they're uncertain. They can't make decisions that are going to help them get there. And so, sadly, sometimes employees, they've been in the fog a long time, right? And so what happens when they've been in a fog, they don't really know where they're headed, what happens? Yeah, they kind of check out, right? Check out, like, I don't care, you don't want me to care, so I'm not going to care. So that's what ends up happening. But that's what we want to do. We want to lift the fog for employees. We want to make sure they know where we're headed, why we're doing it, how are we doing on this journey. And so that's what leaders can do. They can really help paint the picture of, oh, this is how I contribute. This is how we contribute as a group. And that helps people. They get inspired by that. They want to be a part of it. So that's really what you can do as a leader for enterprise alignment. And again, these are some of the questions that you can ask. Who are we? What is our purpose? Or why are we doing Lean and Six Sigma? What's the purpose of it? How does it help us? And how do we create alignment, not just with strategic plans, but really ultimately, you can even do this at a supervisory level. What are we doing? How do we contribute? What can we do with process improvement? So those are some of the pieces that you want to think about. Okay, so this is the box, like I said, there's a lot of effort in continuous improvement, and this is really this floor is where we train people, right? It's all about building up skills and giving them the training, those kinds of things. So that's what's happening in the continuous improvement realm. But I also say, make sure you're giving people time to work on the process, not just in it, right? So how many of you, all of you were all hired because you're good at what you do, or somebody thought you would be good at what you're doing. And so what? They hired you for a specific skill or a specific role or a specific function. And you work really well in that process. But process improvement, you have to step out of this process that you work in, and you need to be able to analyze it, right? And you have to analyze it with others and collaborate and figure out what you need to be doing differently. And so you really, when we step out of the process, why is that uncomfortable? Because sometimes we don't know what to do. Okay, I stepped out of my process. I'm not going to use these awesome skills I've been using for 20 years in this job. I'm going to use different skills. And that's process improvement skills. So we always tell people, give people the tools, but give people time to work on the processes too. And it sounds like many of you are getting the time to do that, which is exciting. Because sometimes I see that happening in organizations. They're not even given any time to work on some of these things. So this is just one of my favorite things is, it's not that everything's broken or horrible or people don't know what they're doing. I like to say processes are like junk drawers. How many of you have a junk drawer? How many of you have a junk room? Yes. Okay, so if you don't look at your processes every once in a while, they're just going to get filled with a bunch of junk you don't need, right? How many of you have that happen right now in some of the processes you work in, where you're like, why do we have to do this step? Or why do I have to put this information in 3 different systems? Do we actually have to put all of this information in all of the systems, right? Anybody? Is this ringing a bell? Yes, I'm seeing some nods. So again, sometimes we are really good at inserting steps in processes like reports. We're good at adding fields to reports. We're really good at adding steps to the process, but we're not so great at removing steps from the process, right? I'll give you an example. How many of you have seen processes automated, but then the paper process is still there? Right? And it's been years now. People are still printing those forms, right? And so why? Because, maybe somebody forgot to tell them to turn it off, right? So stop doing that. So processes are like junk drawers. We do have to take time to clean them out every once in a while and really be diligent about having clean processes, really clean processes. How many of you feel like you have a lot of diligence with the processes yet? Anyone? I know, there's still always opportunity. You guys are doing a great job. And by the way, I've been to other universities. They are extremely jealous of UC San Diego and what UC San Diego is accomplishing with process improvement, and they wish they had the support you guys do. So here's a couple of questions you can ask. How are we continuing to build our employee skills in problem solving? So again, it's not just a one and done. The extension provides yellow belt, green belt, black belt training. But what else? How else are people learning? Have you gone on a tour? Have you seen what people are doing? We just incorporated, as part of the Lean Six Sigma Green Belt program for UCSD, we incorporated a tour. And we went to Costco Optical Labs. We took the whole class there to do a tour. I know, I'm sorry, some of you were like, what? I didn't get that, but it's new. And people loved it. So we got to watch. Costco's been doing process improvement. They have a National City Optical Lab. They do 10,000 pairs of prescriptions a day out of this office. And they are doing process improvement. They've got idea boards. You can feel how engaged these employees are. And it was really good for them to see what engagement looks like. It was really interesting. So, what are we doing to build those skills? It could even just be a tour. It doesn't have to be formal training all the time. And a couple of other questions to think about. And then finally is leadership, cultural enablers of leadership and respect. And that is, the final foundation. Is this working here? Let me see. Oops. Yes. So, and this is really important too. The good news is most people, most leaders, they're in that role most of the time because they are good with people, right? How many of you, not at UCSD, how many of you have maybe had a bad leader in your past? Yes. Okay, bad. What do we mean by bad? I know, don't get emotional. Right? Anyone? Disengaged, they don't care about you. What else? Clueless.
Don't allow you independence.
They don't allow you any independence. They manage you like a 2-year-old, right? These are all things they don't feel good about working there. Honestly, my first good manager, I was 28. I've been working since I was 15, and my first good manager was when I was 28 years old, before somebody cared about me that I worked for. How sad is that? Right? So leaders and respect, these are some of the basic premises that we find are really prevalent in good leaders. That they really believe that people want to do a good job, and that that sometimes the process makes it difficult to do the good job. And that they didn't necessarily create it. Sometimes they inherited it, or sometimes they're forced to do it. And so really promoting, how do we look at these processes? It's not the people. It's not the people that are forced to work in these processes. It's the processes, and really believing that. And then you really have faith in people. People feel safe. So those are really important pieces. So we always say, be hard on the process, not on the people. And then ultimately, people are going to flourish because they will feel safe. They'll say, man, this process is messed up. How many of you have been a bottleneck in a process? Like literally, you sat in the process where the 5 and the 805 merge. How many of you have experienced that? Isn't it horrible? And why is it so horrible? Pressure. People don't like you. They don't think you're doing your job. And you're like, no, it's the process. Really? With 5 and 805, I sit right there. And they're like, whatever. Right? But it's true. We really want to make sure that people feel safe. It's not about them. And if it is them, that's a whole other class. Right? So as a leader, we only have a few more minutes, but here's some of the things that are really important for the role of a leader. Creating ideal conditions. Number 1, reduce fear. People are afraid. The good news is I don't feel a lot of fear at UC San Diego. Maybe I'm wrong. You can call me later and let me know. But reducing fear is really important, and supporting that blame-free environment as a leader. So not always asking, who's responsible for that? Whose fault is it, right? So these are things that don't support a blame-free environment. And we have to recognize if we are promoting any behaviors that have a search for the guilty. What I really like about Ashley's presentation, I know she's going to hate me later again, but all of the things she shared was about this. Creating ideal conditions so that people feel safe and they feel like it's important. And all of that work with daily engagement systems and management systems, those are all things leaders can do, behaviors that help employees understand how important this is. And so I loved that. And it's ultimately, this is your number 1 responsibility, creating ideal conditions as a leader. And I always like this saying, culture is created by what is tolerated and what is promoted. So what do you allow in the organization? So if you allow people to do this, then that will be the culture, blaming. Right? So as a leader, if we say, no, we're not going to tolerate that, we're not going to let people do that anymore. I even did it. And let's not do that anymore. So we're not tolerating that anymore. So we have to identify what we are not going to tolerate and what do we want to promote. And again, daily management systems, having those huddles, they show people that this is important. So it's something to think about. Number 2, building the problem-solving muscle is really important. Focusing on how do we build that problem-solving muscle. If you're a leader and you say, this is my responsibility, I got to build problem-solving muscles, what behaviors would you do to do that? What are some of the things a coach does versus a dictator does? What would a coach do? What was that? Ask questions, right? What else?
Open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions, right? Good. So asking, not always having the answer. Sometimes we feel like as leaders we need the answers for everything. But really what we're doing is we're sucking out and not empowering them. So those are some things that we could do. Anything else you could think of? If you want to build problem-solving muscles, what are you going to do?
No problem.
Yeah! Give them a problem, not the solution, right? We see that a lot in Greenbelt. People are handed the solution to implement, not the problem to solve, right? So that feels much better to say, here, solve this problem for me, as opposed to implement the solution and don't think, right? Okay. So these are the 4 floors that you want to think about, and that hopefully gives you some ammo and some of the questions to reflect on how you can move further along in the journey. This is a great tool. If you haven't used it before, it's a great change management tool. Stop, start, and continue. What do you want to stop doing to help create a stronger and continuous improvement culture? So what I was telling you about, the finger pointing, that might be something over here, right? I had an organization say, we allow bullying. I'm like, what? And they're like, yes. And she actually said to all the leaders, we do. We agree to it right now, right? But yeah, it was a really enriching discussion because they did agree. All of them said, yeah, we are bullying. We're letting people bully each other, and we can't let that happen anymore. So what do you want to start doing? What do you want to continue to do? There's some stuff you're probably doing right now. You guys just shared it. There's a lot of good stuff happening. How do you recognize it, replicate it, and promote it? Keep promoting that good stuff that's happening that will help continue to build that improvement culture. And if you're not really sure what to do, here is a long list of things you could do for each area of the house. So these are sort of action items that I have helped people do, and I've seen other people do for those roadmap actions to build that thing. This is an example of a client or a customer. They had customer results, enterprise alignment, continuous improvement, and culture. And they built a roadmap and said, these are the things that we're going to commit to as a leadership team every quarter for each of these things. And they would check them off with their larger leadership meeting. So that was a lot of fun, and it gave people a roadmap of this journey that we're all on. So I know I'm the only one that's going to give you homework. You're probably going to be happy about that. So share knowledge about the 4 components, assess your own culture, even in your own group, and talk about what components do you think need more attention, and then create a roadmap. It could be high level, and again, it's not a super detailed map. It's really more getting an agreement. Yes, we're behind this, and then as you get closer to that quarter, you detail map out how you're going to go doing that. Okay, I think that is it. Oh, and if you want to know more about these awesome success stories at UCSD, we have recorded some of them on our website, golean6sigma.com, and they're under free resources. You can go to the Success Stories tab, and you can look these up. We've got a few people in this room that are on here. We got Lynn Underwood, and we've got Matthew Helton right in the front, superstar, and a couple of other people too. So that is it. Any questions? Okay, go get them. Okay.